I quietly quit after they promoted the boss's son, and the entire plant fell apart. Reddit stories. Years of hidden labor kept everything running until favoritism finally won. Once I stopped fixing their mistakes, the cracks spread faster than anyone expected. Hi, I'm Hervey, 37, and 3 months ago I walked out of a manufacturing plant I'd basically kept alive for years. I didn't slam the door, didn't make a speech, didn't even take my favorite mug. I handed in my quiet little resignation and went home. 2 days later, the plant burned down metaphorically, and my former boss, who believed she ran the place, stormed through production screaming, "Where is he? Where is he?" right as the board demanded a full explanation for why half the contracts were collapsing like wet cardboard. But before we get there, let me tell you how I became the unofficial life support system for Forge River Industrial Manufacturing, and why leaving was the easiest decision I've ever made. My title was Senior Supply Chain and Production Flow Coordinator, which sounds impressive until you realize it meant one thing. When anything anywhere in the plant went wrong, people yelled my name like I was a one-man emergency hotline. Machines jamming? Hervey! Supplier sent the wrong steel grade? Hervey! Receiving forgot to label pallets again? Hervey! It didn't matter if the issue belonged to warehouse, procurement, production, quality, or a supervisor who couldn't read a schedule. I was the guy they ran to. Not because it was my job, but because I actually knew what I was doing. Meanwhile, the official leadership did not. My boss, Thea, had mastered one skill, standing close enough to successful work that people assumed she helped. And then there was her son, Evan, freshly gifted a position no one else would have survived a day in. If incompetence had a mascot, it would have looked exactly like him scrolling LinkedIn quotes in a hard hat he wore incorrectly. Yet somehow, Thea believed he was destined for greatness. And for months she dangled a shiny, upcoming leadership role in front of me like a carrot, praising my dependability, hinting I was next in line, treating me just well enough to keep me carrying the entire plant on my back. Spoiler, the role wasn't for me. And when the truth finally came out, publicly, humiliatingly, violently incompetent, it lit the fuse that would blow the entire operation wide open. The announcement day felt like someone had cracked open the ceiling and let optimism leak in for the first time in years. People were smiling at me, nodding, whispering things like, "Finally," and "About time," and "Man, you've earned this." Even the forklift operator, who communicated almost exclusively in grunts, patted my arm and said, "Congrats, man." I didn't correct him. Honestly, I wanted to believe it too. The upstairs conference room was packed with high-vis vests and steel-toe boots, the air thick with machine dust and burnt coffee, Forge River's signature perfume. I found a spot along the wall. Supervisors gave me encouraging nods. A few even looked proud. Then Thea stepped up with her usual dramatic posture, chin high, voice polished like she was announcing shareholder results instead of a plant update. "Today marks a new direction for Forge River Industrial Manufacturing," she began, flicking her eyes toward Evan like he was the prize at the end of her speech. And immediately, my stomach dropped. She talked about fresh leadership energy, strategic restructuring, innovative direction. All those corporate fluff phrases people use when they're hiding something behind a curtain. Then she pulled the curtain. "Please join me in congratulating our new regional operations lead, Evan Quinn." Silence. The worst kind of silence. The kind that holds disappointment, disbelief, and second-hand embarrassment all at once. A few pity claps. Some confused blinking. One supervisor muttered, "You gotta be kidding me." I didn't move. Didn't react. Just stood there as my brain quietly rewrote the past 4 months of fake compliments into one clear sentence. "She never intended to promote you." Evan stepped forward with the swagger of a man who once Googled leadership quotes and decided that made him a visionary. "Thanks, everyone," he said, smiling like the room wasn't actively grieving. "I'm excited to revolutionize production flow with progressive alignment strategies, blah blah blah." Workers exchanged looks like he was speaking interpretive nonsense. Someone whispered, "He knows this isn't a school project, right?" When the meeting ended, people didn't congratulate Evan. They stared at me with sympathy usually reserved for funerals. I tried to leave quietly. Didn't make it far. Evan intercepted me near the door. "Hey man," he said, clapping my shoulder like we were old friends. "I'm gonna need you to babysit operations while I adjust. Mom says you're, like, the stability guy." Babysit. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was exactly who he thought I was, the human life jacket that kept him afloat. Then Thea appeared beside him, smiling the way people smile when they're lying on purpose. "Hervey, we're counting on your support during this transition," she said loudly enough for the room to hear. "Evan has a visionary approach. You'll help anchor his ideas." Visionary. The man once confused a coolant gauge with an inventory metric. I nodded, outwardly calm, inwardly processing the clearest moment of clarity I'd had in years. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't oversight. This was intentional. And they expected me to keep everything running while Evan played pretend leader. But that was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Just certainty. Something was coming. Evan's first, official, day as regional operations lead hit the plant like a burst pipe, loud, messy, and guaranteed to ruin everyone's shift. By 9:15 a.m. he had already approved a material swap without checking specs, stalled 2 production lines, confused 3 departments, triggered a supplier argument so severe I got 3 calls before lunch. I spent the entire morning undoing his decisions, rerouting work orders, and explaining to grown adults why our new leader believed 11-gauge steel and 14-gauge steel were close enough. But the real turning point, the moment the whole story cracked open, happened late that night. Around 8:30 p.m., I finally stepped away from my desk to refill my water. The plant was quiet except for the hum of idle machines. As I walked past the offices, I noticed something unusual. Thea's door was cracked open. She never left her door open. She shut it like a vault, especially when she was discussing anything involving her son. I wasn't going to stop. Until I heard my name. "Hervey is not leadership material," Thea snapped. Her tone wasn't irritated, this was contempt dressed as certainty. I froze. She wasn't talking to Evan this time. She was speaking to one of the board members, a guy known for his blunt honesty during walkthroughs. He replied, "He's been running half your plant for years. The team relies on him." I said he's dependable. She shot back. "Not strategic. He's good for grunt labor, nothing more." Grunt labor. The man who kept her plant breathing for years. My jaw tightened, but I didn't move. I needed to hear the rest. The board member sighed. "We're already getting client concerns about delays today." "That's temporary." She cut him off. "The team will carry Evan while he adjusts." Carry him. Like a child on training wheels. The board member lowered his voice. "The delays weren't the team's fault. Evan made several uninformed decisions." "It doesn't matter," she snapped. "Hervey will fix it. He always fixes it." Then she dropped the line that sealed everything for me. "Besides, he can't leave. He's got a kid, bills, responsibilities. He needs this job. We don't." There it was. Not just disregard. Not just favoritism. A calculation. She was counting on my life being hard enough to trap me. I stepped back to leave, until Evan's voice floated out. "Did you talk to him yet?" he asked. "He didn't seem excited to babysit operations." "He doesn't get excited," Thea said. "He just works. That's why he's useful." Useful. Like a wrench. Like equipment. Then Evan said the quiet part out loud. "I just need this title for my resume. I'm not staying in this dump forever." I almost laughed. The board member's patience finally snapped. "This isn't a game. Your decisions today cost us thousands. Evan shrugged. It's not my fault the staff can't keep up. That was it. I walked back to my office, opened my computer, and saw something new in the digital logs. Evan's name stamped onto documents I'd created. Process sheets. Training outlines. Scheduling structures. He'd started taking credit for my work before he even understood what it was. Then a supervisor, Marlin, poked his head in. You didn't hear this from me, he said quietly. But Thea's planning to move you under Evan permanently. No promotion. No raise. Just less authority. I didn't react. He frowned. You already knew, didn't you? Pieces clicked together like a finished puzzle, the fake encouragement, the weird timing, the praise that always led back to Evan. They never intended to lift me up. They intended to use me to prop him up. That night, sitting in the dim light of my office, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. Not defeat. Not anger. Clarity. I wasn't staying. And once I walked out, they would finally see what I'd been holding together all this time. The next morning, I walked into the plant with a kind of peace that worried people. Real peace. The kind you only feel when you know exactly what you're about to do and why. No bitterness. No build-up. No dramatic music. Just certainty. I went straight to my desk, opened a blank document, and typed a resignation letter so short even HR couldn't misinterpret it. I resign. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. Thank you for the opportunity. Printed it. Folded it. Slipped it into an envelope. Walked upstairs. Thea was at her desk, rearranging papers like she was practicing for a performance review she hoped to survive. I placed the envelope in front of her. She opened it. Her face froze. Then twisted. What is this supposed to be? My notice, I said. She laughed, the sharp, panicked kind people use when their plan derails in real time. You're joking. This isn't funny. Not joking. She slammed the letter down. You can't leave now, Hervey. We're restructuring. There are expectations. You are a key part of this transition. I'm not part of anything anymore. Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard. You're being irrational. Think of your son. Think of your responsibilities. You need stability. That's exactly why I'm leaving. She tried a different tactic. Fine. Maybe I pushed you hard this week. That's leadership. It's not personal. Stay loyal, and when things settle, there will be room for growth. You promised growth before. Her jaw twitched. That's when Evan barged in, holding reports upside down. Classic. Mom, these documents make no sense. I think someone formatted them wrong. I stared at him. They're labeled correctly. You just don't know what you're looking at. He scoffed. Wow. Real professional. No wonder things fall apart here. I didn't rise to it. Didn't have to. Thea turned back to me, desperate now. You think you can just walk out? You're critical staff. HR can require longer notice. That's not how the law works. She grabbed her phone and dialed HR on speaker. Hervey is attempting to resign prematurely, she announced. He's essential. You must have a policy. HR answered, exhausted. We can't force him to stay. But he's critical staff. Still not enforceable. She hung up so aggressively the phone bounced. You're making a huge mistake. She hissed. Maybe, I said. But it's mine to make. Evan crossed his arms. So what? You're quitting because you couldn't handle real leadership. People already think that. I smiled slightly. Say whatever helps you sleep. His face darkened. He wasn't used to people not folding. I walked out. Past the office staff. Past supervisors. Past the plant floor where workers paused, watching, sensing something big had shifted. When I stepped outside, the air felt different, cleaner, lighter. For the first time in years, the plant wasn't on my shoulders. Forge River wanted to see how things ran without me? Fine. They were about to find out. The first few days after I submitted my notice felt wrong. Not bad wrong, just unnaturally quiet, like the universe had muted the background noise I'd lived with for years. No constant texts. No emergency calls. No frantic footsteps coming to find me because someone messed up a schedule. It almost felt like vacation, except I was still in the building watching the early stages of a slow-motion disaster. Evan strutted around like a kid wearing his dad's suit, convinced confidence could substitute for competence. He barked orders using words he didn't fully understand and rearranged workflows with all the strategic foresight of a Jenga block. By Monday afternoon, he'd already violated union scheduling rules so badly that the warehouse crew marched into HR as a group. No yelling, no threats, just icy calm. That's the kind of calm that precedes war. By Tuesday, 2 suppliers called me, not Forge River, me, to ask whether the sudden nonsense coming from Evan's email address was a training exercise. One said, politely but exhausted, "Does your new guy know what lead time is, or is he guessing?" The next day, the plant floor grapevine carried a news story. Evan had ignored a maintenance alert and told the crew to run it anyway. The machine broke. Catastrophically. Shut down for hours. Thea blamed maintenance, naturally. Maintenance blamed gravity, fate, and the cruelty of being assigned to that plant. By midweek, things had escalated from annoying to structural failure. A supervisor, Carter, one of the calmest, most competent guys I knew, quit mid-shift. No speech. No drama. Handed in his badge, looked Thea dead in the eye, and said, "I'm not carrying this circus." He walked out. Everyone froze. Because if Carter left, the place was in real trouble. And trouble arrived fast. Thursday. A vendor threatened penalties and contract reevaluation after Evan made promises that defied physics and basic math. Friday morning. The union whispered about a possible walkout. Friday afternoon. Thea blamed the union for resisting innovation. Friday evening. One of my coworkers sent me a photo of pallets stacked wrong, blocking a forklift path so thoroughly it looked like a game of industrial Tetris. The caption said, "Miss you, man." Thea, predictably, shifted into frantic damage control mode. She cornered me 3 separate times during my final week. "We can still fix this. Don't leave now, everything's settling. You're abandoning the team. You won't find better stability. I can still get you that promotion." Every sentence was a rope she threw, expecting me to climb back into the burning house with her. But I was already out. Breathing fresh air. Looking at the flames from a safe distance. My last day was quiet. I cleaned my desk. Left instructions for the folks who didn't deserve the fallout. Shook a few hands. Accepted a few grateful nods. No speeches. No goodbye tour. Just peace. When I walked through the doors for the last time, I didn't look back. They had everything they insisted they wanted. Thea in charge. Evan as leader. Me gone. And within days they'd understand exactly what that really meant. It took exactly 3 days for Forge River to start falling apart loudly enough that people outside the plant noticed. Day 1. Marlin called me on my lunch break. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, voice low. "But we just lost 2 contracts. Clients don't want to deal with Evan. They said his emails read like he's doing a parody of management." I believed it. I'd read those emails. Day 2. Another coworker texted me. "The union just filed formal grievances. Evan changed scheduling again. HR looks like they want to quit too." Day 3. A production lead sent a photo of pallets stacked so badly it looked like someone built modern art out of incompetence. Then came message after message. "We're backed up 3 days. Line 3 shut down. Shipping's refusing to load anything he approved. Vendors are threatening penalties. Receiving is in open revolt." It was like watching a dam crack from every direction. But the real shift, the moment the outside world smelled the smoke, came from a client's LinkedIn post. It didn't name Forge River. It didn't need to. It said, when companies reward entitlement instead of competence, operations collapse. Until leadership changes, we're pausing all future orders. The comments were brutal. Sounds like Forge River. Yikes. Happens when nepotism runs the plant. This is why you keep real talent. And then, didn't they lose their senior coordinator recently? Someone replied. Yeah. The guy who actually knew the job. That post spread fast. Industry circles, vendor networks, supervisors in 3 regions. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Forge River's leadership crisis. Meanwhile, in the plant, Evan completely unraveled. A coworker called me that afternoon, half horrified, half entertained. You won't believe this. Evan had a full meltdown. Screamed at half the floor because the shipment labels weren't aligned with his vision. Someone recorded it. By the next morning, the recording was circulating privately among supervisors. By afternoon, HR had intervened. By evening, the board had questions. But Thea responded the only way she knew how. She fired a long-time procurement employee, steady, competent, well-respected, claiming insubordination. The entire department revolted. HR revolted. The board revolted. And the complaints, the delays, the penalties, the vendor warnings, they all reached a tipping point. That week, someone texted me. They called an emergency meeting. It's bad. Like board-level bad. Another message followed. Thea's blaming everyone but her son. It's embarrassing. Then, on Friday afternoon. Dude. They removed her. The board voted to strip her authority. Security escorted her out. I sat there quietly, letting that sink in. The woman who built her entire identity on control and manipulation had just been walked out of the building she treated like her private kingdom. And it didn't stop there. A few days later, Evan's off the floor. Says the environment is toxic and beneath his skill level. Translation. He couldn't function without me cleaning up behind him. While Forge River spiraled, my new job flourished. Structured days. Professional communication. Competent leadership. Actual sleep. And then the inquiries started. Former clients of Forge River emailing my new company asking, is Hervey overseeing any of your programs? We'd like to move our contract if he's involved. Can we schedule a meeting with him? Not ego. Not validation. Just proof. They never stayed for the plant. They stayed because I kept things moving. Forge River chose nepotism over competence. The industry noticed. And now the industry was choosing me instead. By the time a full month passed, Forge River wasn't a company anymore. It was a slow-motion implosion with a logo. Every day brought a new update from former coworkers, each one more unhinged than the last. 3 more people quit today. 2 supervisors and a scheduler. The warehouse crew refused to follow Evan's old directives. HR backed them. Production hit 30% capacity. They're basically treading water. One vendor outright cut ties. Said they were done chasing leadership errors. The board brought in outside auditors. It's bad. Meanwhile, my new job was everything Forge River pretended to be. My manager told me on week 2, you've been underutilized for a long time. And then actually gave me the resources I needed. No chaos. No constant fire drills. No babysitting adult children who shouldn't have keys to forklifts. And yet, Forge River still wasn't done collapsing. The next big hit came from an industry article. A major publication. Headline: Regional manufacturer faces internal collapse amid leadership failures and nepotism allegations. I read it during lunch. It was merciless. Anonymous employee accounts. Chronic mismanagement. Incompetent new leadership. Massive delays. Vendor distrust. Sudden loss of key operational talent. That'd be me, hello. They didn't name me directly, but lines like Sources say the departure of a senior coordinator revealed structural weaknesses previously masked by individual performance. Yeah. Everyone in the industry knew who they meant. The article ended with this bomb. The board is reportedly reviewing decisions made by Regional Director Thea Quinn. Not even 10 minutes after reading that, I got the message. They fired her. Security walked her out. It's over. She didn't get to draft a speech. Didn't get a farewell meeting. Didn't get a thank you cake in the break room. Just like that, gone. Her son lasted a little longer, mostly because no one knew what to do with him. He drifted from department to department, avoided responsibility, and started telling anyone who'd listen that the culture at Forge River is unstable, and that operations were already flawed before he arrived. Sure, buddy. Then one day, a former coworker messaged me. Evan finally quit. No notice. Just left his badge on a desk and bounced. No ceremony. No farewell. No future career in manufacturing. Meanwhile, my own inbox became a magnet. Former clients requesting meetings. Suppliers thanking me for leaving Forge River so they could follow. 2 companies asking if I offered consultation. Even Forge River employees began applying to my new company. But the moment that really sealed everything came from a former client. We'd like to transition our orders to your plant. We trust your coordination. Not Forge River's. Not Thea's. Not Evan's. Mine. And still, I hadn't said a single bad word publicly. I didn't need to. Forge River told the world exactly who they were. I didn't have to lift a finger. 2 months after I left Forge River, I noticed something strange. I barely thought about them anymore. Not the plant noise, not the stress, not the daily emergencies disguised as emails marked urgent. None of it lived in my head the way it used to. I was sleeping better, eating better, laughing more, actually present when I picked up my son. My new place wasn't perfect, no job is, but it was functional. Professional. Adult. Calm. Then came the manufacturing conference. Big regional event. Fancy venue. Good vendors. Better coffee than the sludge Forge River brewed in their ancient breakroom pot. I was at our company's booth shaking hands, giving tours of our digital systems, answering questions about production flow. People listened when I spoke. They took notes. They treated me like someone who knew what he was doing, which, wild concept, I actually did. Around lunchtime, I stepped away to grab a cup of coffee. That's when I saw him. Near the back wall, alone, shoulders slumped, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Hair a mess, badge crooked, eyes hollow. Evan. He noticed me a second later. His face twitched like he couldn't decide whether to smile or hide under the catering table. He approached slowly. Hervey, he said, voice small. Can we talk? I nodded once. He swallowed. I'm sorry. It hit me softer than I expected, because I could tell it wasn't rehearsed. He wasn't performing. There was no audience, no Thea, no plan to impress. Just guilt. For how I acted, he said. For how I treated you. I didn't know what I was doing. I shouldn't have talked to you like that. He looked around the conference floor like he expected his mother to appear and coach his apology. I'm working at a small plant now, he said. Entry level. Just trying to start over. I realized I didn't know anything. I thought I did. I didn't. For a moment, he wasn't the smug, clueless kid who tanked operations. He was just a young man who'd been stuffed into a role he wasn't ready for, and told to pretend. I gave him a single nod. He didn't drag it out. Didn't beg for praise or closure. Thanks for listening, he said quietly and walked away. And for the first time since any of this began, I didn't feel angry. Didn't feel vindicated. Didn't feel anything except done. The chapter had closed itself. When I got back to my booth, my manager handed me a printed packet. New inquiry, he said. Former Forge River client. Wants to move everything through us. They specifically asked for you. Hours later, another inquiry came in. Then another. Then another. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't payback. It was gravity. Forge River had collapsed under the weight of its own choices. And all the people who actually cared about quality, accountability, and stability were now gravitating toward the one place, and the one coordinator, that proved reliable. That night, driving home with the radio low and my son's car seat in the back, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Forward motion. Not survival. Not recovery. Real, steady progress. Forge River was my past. What came next was mine to build. Word travels fast in manufacturing circles, especially when a company implodes as loudly as Forge River. By the time autumn rolled in, their name had become a cautionary tale whispered in shipping docks and vendor meetings. Don't pull a Forge River. Watch your leadership. Remember what happened over there. They lost half their contracts in a month. And somehow, without ever raising my voice, throwing a fit, or posting a cryptic LinkedIn essay, my name kept floating on the other side of those conversations, the side people trusted. My calendar booked itself. Consultations. Operational evaluations. Process redesigns. Full-scale transitions of multimillion-dollar accounts. Clients didn't care about my job title. They cared that when things went bad, I made them run again. My new company noticed too. My manager pulled me into a meeting one afternoon. Not the "we need to talk" kind, nobody whispered beforehand, and there were snacks. He said, "You've brought in more new business in 2 months than we projected for the year. How do you feel about building a dedicated integration team?" A team. My team. People who'd never see me as a safety net, or a spare tire or a guy to dump problems on. People who actually wanted to learn the systems, not pretend to. I said yes. That night, while my son worked on homework at the kitchen table, I spread out notes, client specs, flow diagrams, staffing needs. He glanced over and said, "Dad, you're smiling?" I didn't realize I was. Then came the email. A familiar address. Name I hadn't seen since the meltdown. The Forge River Board. Subject line. Professional inquiry. I almost laughed. Their message was long, polished, and dripping with corporate remorse. They explained they'd identified profound leadership failures, bold of them to discover that 6 months after the building caught fire. They asked if I might be available for consultation, plant restructuring guidance, or even interim leadership work. Interim leadership. At the same plant that treated me like a disposable wrench. I didn't even respond right away. I slept on it. Went to work the next morning. Ran an onboarding meeting for 2 new clients. Every time I compared the chaos of my old life to the calm structure of my new one, the same thought repeated. I didn't escape a burning building. I walked out before they lit the match. Late that night, after my son fell asleep, I finally drafted a reply. Short. Professional. Clear. Thank you for reaching out. At this time, I am not available for involvement with Forge River's operations. I wish you the best in rebuilding. I read it twice. Felt nothing but relief. Hit send. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed, a message from Marlon. Dude! They wanted to bring you back? Ha! Place is a ghost town. Good call. And that was the moment I realized something important. I hadn't just survived the collapse. I'd outgrown it. Forge River was still sifting through ashes. I was already building something new. Something stable. Something respected. Something mine. A few weeks later, I found myself sitting in a corner office I never expected to have, not because of ego, but because I finally had space that didn't smell like burnt coolant and stale panic. A real office. A door that closed. A whiteboard that stayed where I left it. A desk not covered in emergency printouts. My integration team, my team, was up to 5 people. Smart, curious, reliable folks who didn't treat responsibility like a hot potato. The kind of crew who asked questions because they wanted to understand, not because they needed someone to bail them out. One morning, during a cross-department planning call, our VP announced a string of new contracts we'd won. 3 big ones, 2 medium ones, and a couple of small but steady accounts. All of them referenced the same reason for choosing us: operational confidence, clear communication, reliable coordination, based on previous experience working with Hervey. Not the plant. Not the machines. Not the brand. Me. After the meeting, the VP pulled me aside. "You've become our competitive advantage," he said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. If you want more resources, ask." I nodded, but inside, something quiet settled into place. For years, I'd been treated like a backup generator, useful only when things broke, expected to run endlessly, ignored until the lights went out. But here, I wasn't the backup. I was the infrastructure. The next week, I was invited to a vendor summit as a featured speaker. Not a filler slot. A headliner. A session where people took notes, recorded quotes, asked for copies of my slides. A vendor I'd worked with for years shook my hand afterward. "Man," he said, "you were the only reason we stuck with Forge River as long as we did." They never understood what they had. He wasn't the only one who said something like that. Over the course of the summit, I heard variations of it from at least 8 people. And then, inevitably, there were the Forge River folks. Not Thea. Not Evan. They'd evaporated from the industry. But others, shipping leads, procurement reps, supervisors, approached me quietly, almost sheepishly. "Hey, you hiring? Any room on your team? If something opens up, could you let me know?" Not pity. Not flattery. Just people finally trying to escape a building that had been shaking long before it fell. I told them the truth. "We're growing. Stay in touch." And I meant it. Because the difference between Forge River and where I was now wasn't just leadership. It was trust, respect, competency, stability. The things I used to carry alone were now shared across a whole team. But the moment that stuck with me, the one that told me how far I'd come, happened one night after a long, clean, uneventful day. My son and I were sitting on the couch, building a Lego set he'd been excited about. Halfway through, he looked at me and said, "Dad, you don't look tired anymore." It hit harder than any contract, any praise, any promotion. Because he wasn't wrong. For the first time in years, I wasn't exhausted. I wasn't drained. I wasn't bracing for the next disaster. I was living. Forge River had tried to build a future on my back. When I stepped away, the whole structure collapsed. But me? I didn't collapse with it. I rebuilt. And this time, the foundation was mine. About 3 months into my new role, I got an unexpected email from a consulting firm that handled leadership audits for manufacturing companies. Big firm. National. The kind of group whose reports can make or break entire operations. Subject line: Request for professional insight, former Forge River operations. I opened it expecting a survey or a polite inquiry. It wasn't polite. It was clinical. Direct. Surgical. They wanted to interview me about operational vulnerabilities prior to my departure, documented leadership failures, systemic risks posed by nepotistic management, the timeline of Forge River's collapse, and any recommendations I might offer for future restructuring. Translation: The board was in full triage mode, and they were calling in forensic accountants for the soul of the company. I decided to decline, politely, professionally, with my lawyer's blessing. Not because I was afraid. Because it wasn't my job anymore to clean up their mess. Instead, I focused on my team. We'd just landed a major automotive components contract. Huge long-term partnership. The kind of deal that stabilizes an entire department. They insisted on touring our facility before finalizing the agreement, which meant I spent the morning guiding them through production, warehousing, scheduling, and systems integration. Halfway through the tour, one of the visiting execs stopped beside me and said, "You know, we used to work with Forge River. Things only ran smoothly when you were involved. When you left, everything fell apart fast." I nodded. "Yeah. I heard." He continued, "Well, they're not on our vendor list anymore. But you're the reason we're here." He said it casually, like it wasn't the most validating sentence I'd heard in a decade. Later that afternoon, my manager called me into his office. He gestured for me to close the door. "Don't worry," he said, smiling. "This is good." Then he showed me a spreadsheet. A live one. Revenue projections. Client retention numbers. New accounts acquired. Every line tied back, directly or indirectly, to my work. "You've changed our entire operational profile," he said. "Leadership is considering a new position, higher level, more strategic. We want you on that track." I sat there, letting that sink in. At Forge River, strategy meant covering for incompetent leadership. Here, it meant building something real. When I got home that night, my son and I made dinner together, simple stuff, pasta and garlic bread. He talked about school, a kid who brought a frog inside a backpack, an upcoming art project. Halfway through, he said, "Dad, you're different now." I paused. "How so?" "You laugh more," he said. "It's like you're not carrying something heavy anymore." Out of the mouths of kids. I didn't know how heavy Forge River had been until I finally put it down. Later that evening, I checked my phone. Another message from a former colleague. "Forge River just announced temporary shutdowns. Not enough staff, not enough contracts." Followed by another. "They're asking old employees to come back. Seriously. Above your pay grade too." And another. "They're telling people you might return to consult. Thought you should know they're spreading that." I chuckled. The old plant, rattling around in its last remaining screws, still trying to use my name like a patch over a hole the size of its entire leadership team. I didn't reply. Didn't correct them. Didn't get involved. Because here's the truth. I didn't need Forge River anymore. But they still needed the man they underestimated. And that difference? That was everything. Forge River shut down a month later. Not officially, just quietly, piece by piece, until only the lights were left on. Someone texted me a photo of the empty floor. No people. No noise. Just a dead plant. I didn't feel triumph. Just closure. My team kept growing. My clients kept coming. My life finally felt like it belonged to me. Forge River taught me one thing. If you carry a whole building, they'll assume it can stand without you. Walk away, and truth does the rest.